Hello, my name is Vincent, and my paper surrounds the critique of Cartesian dualism. So what is Cartesian dualism? Well, it's a metaphysical system created by René Descartes to answer the question, what is the nature of the relationship between mind and body? And so it is a form of substance dualism, which pretty much means the separation of the mind and body, which categorizes the mind as a different form of substance than the body. That is substance dualism, and it's Cartesian in the sense that, well, of course, it's Descartes, but it's also Descartes. Descartes uses his own special theories to justify it, which we're familiar with here, like cogito ergo sum. He uses that. So let's start with the implications. Why even care if the mind is separate from the body? If you believe there's a soul, or if you're an adherent to any of the monotheistic religions, you essentially believe that everyone is immortal, in that their mind lives on after they die, and their body is just a vessel which decays, but then their mind goes on. Their mind, which inhabits all their memories and emotions and thoughts and conscience, moves on to some afterlife or whatever, right? And René Descartes tries to support the notion that a soul exists. And to do that, he would have to separate the mind from the body. Here's why Descartes thinks that a mind is fundamentally some different thing than the body. Given uniqueness, it follows, moreover, that any possible thinking thing has a part that has thinking as its only principal attribute, and that any possible extended thing has a part that has extension as its only principal attribute. Descartes concludes in his sixth meditation that anything which is thinking has a principal attribute, thinking, right? The mind has a principal attribute, thinking. And he concludes that the body has a principal attribute, extension. Extension meaning taking place in the physical world. And he supports this with the argument from divisibility. In principle, physical things can be divided into smaller parts. This is in accordance with the principal attribute of extension, whereas the mind can't be divided. Now, Descartes acknowledges that the brain has its own faculties. You have the hippocampus, which does such and such, and the prefrontal cortex, which does other stuff. But that's not what he's referring to. He's referring to the exact way that your mind works right now. That is, can you divide your memories? Can you cut your memories in half? No, you can't. You really can't. Can you cut your conscience in half? No. So Descartes concludes that because you can, if you cut your arm in half, if the mind is truly a part of the body, if you cut your arm in half, it doesn't really affect your mind. Again, you can cut your brain in half and you'd be dead, but that doesn't really conclude whether or not the mind is separate from the body. You'd just be dead physically. That's what the argument of divisibility is. His next argument from conceivability, that's a very compelling argument. Descartes argues through a hypothetical that because you can clearly conceive something and you can clearly distinctively imagine it, it is possible. What does that mean? Well, so imagine you wake up one morning and you go to brush your teeth and you look in the mirror and there's nothing there. There's nothing, you don't see anything in the reflection. You see absolutely nothing. You try and, feel where your body would be with nothing, because you look down and there's no body there. You look down at yourself, there's nothing. You try and move your arms, there's no arms. There's just nothing there. But you can imagine that. Descartes argues it is possible, because you can imagine that, it's possible that the mind can be separate from the body. Another example is, imagine there is a man that jumps over a skyscraper. Is that possible physically? In terms of physics, is that possible? Not really. But what if you were on, a different planet? Or what if you were in space? It's possible, maybe. But the point is that it's not absolutely impossible. Now, compare this to an impossibility. So you have a man that can jump over skyscrapers, and you can imagine your body not existing, but your mind is still there. What would an impossibility be? An impossibility would be trying to imagine a square circle, or a married bachelor. Can you imagine those things? No, because you can't. It's the complete opposite of the definition. If the mind were a part of the body, it would be completely inconceivable to think about your body not existing, because it's the same as saying an unsquare square, or again, the opposite of the definition, a married bachelor. So that's his argument, and it's, in my opinion, pretty strong. Another one of Descartes' arguments for the separation of mind and body is with cogito ergo sum. I think therefore I am, right? Descartes pretty much uses cogito ergo sum to say that I've doubted everything, I'm 100% certain I exist. But my body, I'm not 100% certain I exist. But if my mind was my body, I would be 100% certain, except it isn't. So, therefore, they're two separate things. Now, let's review Cartesian dualism's biggest critiques. The first one, Jae Kim, is a Korean-American philosopher and a pretty big critic of Descartes. He reiterates the original problem posed by Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, who wrote to Descartes in a letter the interaction problem. So let's suppose that the mind really was immaterial and the body was material. Why is it that when I feel sad, when I think sad thoughts, when I think of all the stray dogs in the world, I cry? Why is that? Well, it's a causal reaction, right? I think of sad thoughts, my body reacts with tears. Lots of tears. So the problem is, the interaction problem poses a very simple question. How is it that something immaterial can interact with something material? Because when I move my hands or cry or whatever, it's a chain of physical things reacting with one another, neurons or whatever, all the way into my brain. Where does my mind come into play? Because my mind, it's not like it can interact with my brain. It's not material. In my opinion, Descartes fails to answer this question. Descartes' response to the interaction problem is that pineal gland serves as kind of like a portal between material and immaterial. Does that make the pineal gland its own substance, in that it can be both immaterial or material? I'm not quite sure. The next argument, or the next critique towards Cartesian dualism, is the tethering problem, in the same way that the interaction problem works. So, suppose that the mind really is immaterial. Why is it that I'm seeing and feeling and sensing exactly what exactly what I've just listed, but why in this specific body? My mind is immaterial. Why am I not floating around? Because if it's really immaterial, there shouldn't be really anything. It shouldn't really be constrained by anything material, or else it would have extension. It would have the principal attribute of extension. It would have to physically be connected to the material. And again, Descartes fails. His answer is the pineal gland once more, in that the mind is tethered to the pineal gland. That's doesn't really answer the question. It kind of just pushes it back. The next set of critiques come from a contemporary philosopher called Gilbert Ryle. So Ryle claims that in distinguishing the different properties of mind and body, Descartes makes what Ryle calls a category mistake. Category mistake is essentially when something belonging to a certain category is misrepresented in some other category as if it really does belong there. A hypothetical for this category mistake would be a student visits the University of Washington, Seattle, the campus, and he goes to all the colleges within the university. So like the College of Medicine, or he goes to the Foster School in the campus, or he goes to the Allen School in the campus. But at the end of his tour, he asks the question, I've seen all the colleges and the schools and the dining halls and the library of the University of Washington, Seattle, but where is the University of Washington, Seattle? That is a mistake, obviously, because everything that the student was seeing was the University of Washington, Seattle. It was all those things were contained into the campus. So Ryle accuses Descartes of making essentially the same mistake. Essentially, Descartes looked at the mind, and instead of categorizing it as a part of the body, as an expression or a mode of the body, he categorized it as something completely different, or the principal attribute to be completely different, that is. Ryle kind of maintains the notion that mental processes are really better understood as descriptions of behavior. Ryle was a behaviorist. So Ryle's final objection to Descartes is the masked man fallacy. So let's say you're at a party and you see a guy in a giant inflatable dinosaur costume come out, and you can't see his face or his body. You pretty much essentially know nothing about who's under the suit, but you know it's a big inflatable dinosaur costume. Is it reasonable to 100% assume, to say in absolute, that man, the costume man, is not your father? No. Simply because you don't know enough about who's underneath the costume. Ryle accuses Descartes of making such a mistake. Simply because you know your father with 100% certainty, but you don't know the costume man, does not mean that it is a property of that thing. That doesn't mean you can properly separate the two, because what if the man under the costume is your father? You don't know. You can't know if he isn't. The only thing you can really establish is what you do and don't know, but that doesn't make it an actual property. Descartes does this in that he separates mind and body using cogito ergo sum, but he uses the fact he doesn't know his body to separate it from the mind. Again, it's just because you don't know something for sure does not make it a property of that thing. So, in conclusion, Cartesian dualism, although it's very intriguing, it kind of falls short of providing a coherent and integrated account of like mental and physical interactions. So, hope you enjoyed.